judge chuckled the moment he saw the teenager stroll in wearing his father's suit. But what happened next caught everyone completely off guard. No one expected the boy in the oversized navy jacket to speak. Elijah Carrington entered the Miller County Courthouse in Camilla, Georgia, with the kind of confidence that made it seem like he'd done this many times before. The jacket sleeves were too long, hiding most of his hands, his tie hung crooked, and the briefcase he carried looked worn, like it had been handed down through generations. Yet, Elijah moved with calm precision, his back straight, eyes fixed ahead, as if on serious business. Inside the courtroom, whispers buzzed through the crowd. Who was this kid? A clerk's cousin? Someone's assistant? Just some boy wandering in off the street? Judge Raymond Tolbert glanced up from his bench, glasses perched low on his nose, and smirked, that sideways grin that speaks volumes without a word, the kind that can make your stomach twist. Elijah didn't flinch. He walked directly to the defense table, opened the briefcase, and pulled out 3 neatly stacked file folders and a worn copy of the Georgia Code. He placed them down carefully, like a craftsman arranging his tools before work. Finally, Judge Tolbert broke the silence. Lost son? No, sir, Elijah answered, steady and clear. I'm here representing my brother, Isaiah Carrington. A hush fell so heavy even the courtroom clock seemed to pause. The bailiff blinked. The prosecutor, Andrea Lindholm, looked up with a raised eyebrow, and someone stifled a laugh in the third row. Tolbert leaned back in his chair. Representing? You mean observing? No, sir, representing. Elijah held up a notarized document. Isaiah had filed a motion to represent himself and designated Elijah as his representative under Georgia's legal allowances. Tolbert's smirk grew wider. Son, this isn't a mock trial. This is a felony case. I get that you're 17. No license to practice law, no formal training. No, sir, Elijah said, glancing at the gallery, then back at the judge. But I've studied the law for 2 years and read everything related to my brother's case twice. The courtroom shifted. No more chuckles, only tense silence. Tolbert exhaled slowly. Well, we'll see how long that confidence lasts. He looked to the prosecutor. Lindholm hesitated, unsure. Is the paperwork in order? It's legal. Strange, but legal, Tolbert muttered, flipping through his docket. This is a preliminary hearing. We're deciding if there's enough to go to trial. If your brother wants you to speak for him, I'm not stopping you. Elijah nodded without a smile. Yes, Your Honor. He took his seat. From the back row, Isaiah watched quietly, hands cuffed, wearing an orange jumpsuit wrinkled at the collar, but his eyes held something steady, something proud. The clerk called the case, State of Georgia versus Isaiah Carrington. The courtroom reset. Andrea Lindholm stood, outlining the charges: burglary, resisting arrest, possession of stolen property. She painted a simple picture. Isaiah was caught red-handed, fleeing a house with stolen electronics in his car. The arresting officer identified him on the spot. No mention of missing fingerprints, no alibi, no word about the anonymous tip that triggered the stop. Tolbert nodded along as things moved too fast. Maybe too fast. Then Elijah stood calmly. Your Honor, may I cross-examine the officer? A flicker of surprise crossed Tolbert's face. You may. Officer Paul Haskins approached. Big guy, mid-40s, built like a linebacker with a booming voice made for radio. He looked down at Elijah as if studying an odd experiment. State your name for the record, Elijah said, serious but respectful. The courtroom tensed. Elijah's tone wasn't rude, just steady and clear. Elijah wasn't just asking questions. He was conducting a sharp, focused cross-examination. Officer Haskins, you said you saw my brother inside the vehicle with stolen items? Yeah, flat-screen TV in the back seat, 2 laptops. I pulled him over after getting a tip, Haskins replied. That tip, did you log it anywhere? No. You said he ran, that he tried to escape, but you stopped him. Elijah flipped open a file, holding up a photo. It showed Isaiah face down, handcuffed, kneeling, time-stamped 5 minutes before the official traffic stop. The courtroom stirred. Haskins blinked in surprise. Judge Tolbert leaned forward. "Where did that come from?" "A neighbor's ring cam," Elijah answered. "The arrest didn't happen during the stop. It happened before. That's an unlawful seizure." The mood in the room shifted instantly, but what happened next stunned everyone, making them forget they were looking at a teenager. Officer Haskins mumbled, "I must have gotten the time wrong." Elijah didn't even blink. "So your official report is wrong, your body cam was off, and you didn't record the anonymous tip," Tolbert interrupted sharply. "Let's keep the tone respectful, Mr. Carrington." Elijah nodded. "Of course, Your Honor. I'm just trying to get to the truth." Whispers floated through the room. People who came expecting drama now sat up straight. This was serious. From the defense table, Elijah picked up another file. "I'd also like to submit a sworn statement from Mrs. Wanda Freeman, the homeowner." Tolbert glanced at the document. "You had her sign this yourself?" "Yes, sir. Yesterday afternoon." "And what does she say?" "She says nothing was missing. The TV was exactly where she left it. The door was locked. No signs of a break-in." Prosecutor Lindholm stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this wasn't disclosed in discovery." Elijah answered smoothly, "She wasn't interviewed by police. I found her myself." Tolbert raised an eyebrow. "How'd you get her to talk?" "I asked politely," Elijah said. A few chuckles echoed, not at Elijah, but with him. The judge scanned the statement. "She confirms Isaiah wasn't in her home. She didn't see him at all that day. Found out about the arrest from the local paper." Tolbert's eyes narrowed. His smirk vanished. Now he was thinking. The courtroom door creaked open late as Mr. Clean, the town's unofficial court watcher, slipped inside. Retired, nosy, always with a notepad, he whispered to someone, "What's going on?" "Some kid is defending his brother," the woman replied, "and he's killing it." Earlier that morning, outside the courthouse on a cracked sidewalk near a rusty bike rack, Elijah had stood with his brother's former lawyer, Dwayne Carter. Carter looked down at Elijah like he was trying to solve an impossible math problem. "You can't do this, kid," Carter had said. "Court's not some school project." "I know," Elijah had replied calmly, "but you don't believe my brother, and I do. Belief doesn't win trials." "No, but the truth might." Carter shook his head, muttered something about watching too many movies, and walked away. Now, in that courtroom, Elijah was proving every late night he spent studying in the Camilla Public Library was worth it. Listening to recorded lectures on his cracked iPhone, watching old trials on YouTube, reading used law books he bought for $5 each at a second-hand shop. He didn't have a law degree, but he had facts. No courtroom experience, but he had instinct. And right now, he had momentum. Judge Tolbert cleared his throat. "Let me get this straight. The arresting officer's timeline is off. The supposed victim denies anything was stolen, and there's no proof of forced entry." "Yes, sir? And you, Mr. Carrington, uncovered this all on your own?" Elijah looked over at his brother, then back at the judge. "I had to. No one else was doing it." A heavy silence fell. The judge leaned back. No smirk this time, just a serious crease between his eyebrows. "You said you're 17? Judge Tolbert sighed through his nose, like he was reluctant to say what came next. "Well, so far, you're more prepared than half the licensed lawyers who stand before me." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Prosecutor Andrea Lindholm crossed her arms, not smiling. Elijah kept his face steady, but inside, his heart hammered, not from nerves, but focus. Every moment counted, every word mattered, and he wasn't slowing down. He stepped back to the table, sliding the folders into a neat pile, and quietly whispered to Isaiah, "You all right?" Isaiah nodded. "You're doing better than I ever imagined." Elijah smirked slightly, eyes fixed ahead. If anyone thought the kid in the baggy suit was done, they were about to learn how wrong they were. When Elijah rose for his second round of questioning, you could feel the shift in the room. Nobody cared about the ill-fitting suit anymore. They were watching him, watching how he spoke calmly, never raising his voice, never stumbling or showing doubt. Elijah flipped open his worn notebook, pages scribbled and dog-eared from use. "Officer Haskins," he said, "you testified you found 2 laptops in the vehicle. Do you have the serial numbers?" "No," Haskins replied. "They were logged after the fact by the property division." "Can you confirm they were reported stolen?" "I believe so," Haskins said hesitantly. "You believe?" Elijah pressed. "Well, that's what I was told." Elijah stepped aside and held up another paper. "According to this report from the electronics store 3 blocks from my house, my brother bought those laptops 2 days earlier using his own debit card." He showed the receipt. Haskins stared. Lindholm stood abruptly. "Your Honor, I wasn't provided this during discovery." "You didn't ask," Elijah shot back, holding her gaze, "because you assumed he was guilty." Tolbert raised his hand. "Enough. Let me see the document." Elijah calmly handed it over. Tolbert adjusted his glasses, face unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Lindholm sat back down slowly. From the 3rd row, a whisper floated. "That boy came with receipts." But Elijah wasn't finished. "I'd like to call my next witness, Travis Dent." A man in his mid-30s, wearing work boots and a faded mechanic shirt, rose from the back and took the stand. Tolbert looked surprised. "Was this witness disclosed?" "No, sir, but he's relevant. I can explain." Tolbert sighed. "Make it quick." Elijah turned to Travis. "Can you tell the court your relationship to Officer Haskins?" Travis shifted nervously. "He's my cousin." "Did he talk to you the night Isaiah was arrested?" "Yeah." "What did he say?" "Objection!" Lindholm stood. "Hearsay, Your Honor. It's about motive." Elijah pressed. "Let me finish." Tolbert nodded. "I'll allow it for now." Travis cleared his throat. "He said he finally got him. Said he was tired of seeing those Carrington boys walking around like they owned the place. Said Isaiah thought he was slick with the system, but wasn't smart enough to beat a uniform." Gasps echoed sharply. Tolbert's face darkened. Lindholm scribbled furiously. Elijah stepped closer, voice quieter. "Did he say anything about setting him up?" Travis swallowed hard. "One anonymous call is all it takes in this town. Who they gonna believe? Me or some kid with a smart mouth?" Isaiah closed his eyes slowly. The courtroom fell silent. Elijah turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this shows not just a pattern of misconduct, but personal bias that directly affected the arrest and investigation." Tolbert leaned back, clearly wanting to argue, but words failed him. Elijah continued, "If this is justice, then we need to stop pretending it starts with the uniform. It starts with the truth. My brother isn't perfect, but he didn't do what they're accusing him of. Everything presented here today proves that." Tolbert looked at Lindholm. "Do you have any rebuttal?" She hesitated. "I'll need time to verify these new statements and evidence." Elijah was ready. "You can take all the time you want, but every day he spends in that cell is a day stolen from someone who hasn't even had a fair chance to be heard." Tolbert didn't respond right away. He just stared at Elijah for a long moment, like he was looking through him, maybe seeing him clearly for the first time. But the hearing was far from over, and Elijah still had one move left that would leave everyone stunned. Tolbert called for a 10-minute recess. No one really left. Some stepped into the hallway, but their eyes stayed glued to the courtroom as if held by gravity. Even the janitor, who usually cleaned at lunchtime, leaned on his broom near the door, watching. Inside, Elijah sat alone at the defense table, calm and ready. Elijah sat alone, sorting through papers. No lawyer hovering over him, no team whispering advice, just him, a stack of folders, and a tired briefcase with a broken latch. Across the room, Lindholm leaned toward Officer Haskins, whispering sharply. Haskins didn't look up. He just stared straight ahead, like someone caught playing with matches and burning more than intended. Judge Tolbert remained behind the bench, writing carefully. He looked older now, or maybe just worn down. The kind of expression you get when a story you've been telling yourself starts to unravel. 10 minutes passed. "Back on the record," Tolbert said flatly, tapping the gavel. "Mr. Carrington, You may proceed with any remaining witnesses or statements." Elijah stood, calm and deliberate. He placed one last document before him and looked the judge directly in the eye. "No more witnesses, Your Honor. Just one question for the court." Tolbert raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." Elijah stepped forward. "What happens when the system makes a mistake and nobody says a word?" The judge said nothing. "What happens when a person gets arrested not because of what they did, but because of who someone thinks they are?" The courtroom was silent. "I've read a lot of case law, Your Honor, more than most people my age. I've read your rulings, too. From 2003 until now, you've sentenced men like my brother to 10 years for first offenses. You've denied motions for mistrials due to lack of cause. But I read one case from 2009, State vs. Larrabee. Do you remember that one?" Tolbert's face twitched just barely. "Of course," Elijah nodded. "You remember the witness who changed her statement? The missing dash cam footage? You still let it go to trial? And that man was convicted." "That case was reviewed and closed," Tolbert cut in. "It was overturned 4 years later, after that man had already lost his family, his job, everything," Elijah said firmly. Lindholm stood. "Your Honor, is this cross-examination or a lecture?" Tolbert said nothing, simply watching Elijah. "This isn't about revenge," Elijah said, turning toward the gallery. "It's about accountability. How many people in this room know someone locked up for something they didn't do?" Hands rose quietly, one by one. Tolbert's jaw clenched. "You asked me earlier if I knew what I was doing. I do. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm standing up for my brother because no one else would, not even you." The words hung heavy, not loud but weighted. Tolbert adjusted his robe, looked down, then finally said, "The court will take a short recess. I'll issue a ruling within the hour. Gavel down." He stood and walked through the side door, but paused to shoot Elijah one last look. No smirk, no sarcasm, just a face cracked open by the truth. Elijah sat slowly, silent. Isaiah leaned forward behind him and whispered, "You all right?" Elijah didn't look back. "I think I finally made him listen." From the gallery, someone muttered, "I don't know who raised that boy, but they sure as hell did something right." Outside, clouds rolled in. The light dimmed through the courthouse windows, casting soft shadows across the room, but Elijah looked brighter than ever. Still, the verdict wasn't in. One sentence from the judge could tear it all down. An hour stretched like forever. The courtroom buzz faded into a strange quiet. Not tense, not relaxed, just waiting. Elijah sat alone, elbows on the table, hands folded, eyes fixed on the door. Judge Tolbert had disappeared behind it. He hadn't moved much since the recess, hadn't checked his phone, hadn't fidgeted, just waited. Across the aisle, Isaiah sat taller now. The chains around his wrist had been removed by court order, a small gesture, but one full of meaning. At 2:03 p.m., the judge returned, his robe dragging slightly, face unreadable. He shuffled papers, then looked up. "This hearing is now back in session. My ruling will be delivered orally and entered into the record." The room seemed to hold its breath. After reviewing the evidence, some of which was admittedly unexpected, it is the opinion of this court that the prosecution has not demonstrated sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Gasps filled the room. One person clapped, then was immediately shushed. Tolbert's voice was flatter than usual. "The charges against Isaiah Carrington are hereby dismissed with prejudice." You could hear a pin drop. Then it all hit at once. Shoulders dropped, murmurs rose, someone cried softly in the back. Isaiah looked at Elijah, mouth opening, then closing, speechless. Tolbert tapped the gavel once more. "Mr. Carrington is free to go." Lindholm didn't stand. She sat stiffly, biting the inside of her cheek. Officer Haskins got up and walked out silently. Elijah didn't jump or pump his fist. He simply stood, gathered his notes, and placed everything back into the battered briefcase, like it was just another day. School was out, but Judge Tolbert stayed at the bench, watching Elijah closely. Then he did something no one expected. He cleared his throat and called out, "Mr. Carrington, would you please approach the bench?" Elijah stepped forward, and the courtroom held its breath. Tolbert leaned in slightly, voice low so only a few could hear. "You made me look into a mirror I've been avoiding for a long time." Elijah didn't smile. "That wasn't the point, sir. I just wanted my brother back." Tolbert nodded slowly. "Well, you got him. And you might have changed more than you realize." He paused, like he wanted to say more but wasn't sure how. Then he added, "Don't stop." Elijah stepped back and said nothing as the judge stood and disappeared behind the wooden door. The room erupted in applause, not loud, but weighted with meaning. A man shouted from the back, "This boy just made history in Camilla." Elijah walked over to Isaiah, who was already being uncuffed, and handed his hoodie and wallet. They stood face to face, no words at first. Then Isaiah shook his head, blinking back tears. "You did the impossible." Elijah shrugged, fighting a smile. "Wasn't impossible, just ignored." Side by side they walked out of the courtroom. The crowd parted like water. Some nodded, some just stared. An older woman whispered, "Lord, let that boy go far." Outside, the sun had returned. Across the street, a local reporter was setting up a mic, but Elijah kept walking, past the courthouse steps, past the news van, down the cracked sidewalk where his bike still leaned against the rack. Isaiah laughed softly. "You really rode your bike to court? Gas money ain't free." Elijah grinned. They both laughed. But there was one more person Elijah wanted to see, someone who never set foot in the courtroom, but made all this possible. His shoes crunched softly over gravel as he crossed the courthouse's back parking lot. His suit jacket swung open in the wind, tie a little looser now. He wasn't in a rush. He just needed to get there. A small brick building sat on the corner of Broad and Chestnut, its faded sign and rusted mailbox marking the Camilla Public Library. Elijah pushed open the door and stepped into the smell of old pages and worn carpet. At the front desk sat Ms. Harmon, in her 60s, glasses held together with tape, hair in a bun leaning slightly left. She looked up from her crossword and teased, "Shouldn't you be in school?" Elijah smiled. "I was kind of." She squinted. "Wait, don't tell me you did it." He nodded slowly. Her face cracked into a grin. "I knew it. I've been watching you sit in that corner every day like the books owed you money." "They kinda did," Elijah chuckled. She stood, rounded the desk, and pulled him into a hug that smelled like cinnamon gum and old bookmarks. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "Don't let this town shrink you down, you hear me?" "I hear you." They stood like that for a moment before Elijah glanced over at the familiar table in the corner. The same spot where he'd spent months, headphones in, notebook out, reading cases while the world moved around him. He ran his hand across the scratched surface as Ms. Harmon watched. "What happens now?" Elijah looked out the window at Isaiah waiting on the sidewalk, leaning against the bike, sunlight warming his face. "I don't know," Elijah said, "but I'm not done." That afternoon, Camilla started seeing Elijah Carrington differently. Some still whispered, others stared, but more people just said his name, with a pause, like it meant something. 3 weeks later, the local paper ran a story, "Teen legal prodigy frees brother in courtroom standoff." It wasn't quite accurate, but the message stuck. Officer Haskins quietly took early retirement. Lindholm was reassigned to a lower profile circuit, and Judge Tolbert? He started showing up differently, less smirking, more listening. At the next town meeting, when a teenager stood up to talk about starting a local education fund for kids who couldn't afford test prep or tutors, it was Tolbert who stood beside him, no robe, just a man trying to do better. As for Elijah, he didn't suddenly become famous. No scholarships fell from the sky. No law school offers came overnight. But he kept studying, and he kept showing up every week at the library, sometimes with a few younger kids sitting beside him, flipping through the same books he once pored over, because Elijah didn't win just for his brother. He won for every kid who'd been told, "Not yet. You're too young." Or, "This isn't for you." He didn't wait for permission. He prepared, and when the moment came, he walked in head high, suit too big, briefcase in hand, and proved that genius isn't about age or title or what they expect you to be. It's about truth. and the courage to speak it, even when nobody's listening. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to stay quiet. So if you believe in something, stand up, speak up, and don't let anyone's doubt decide your future. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Never forget, your voice can change everything.